Welcome back to Indie Film Weekly for the week of February 27, 2026. I'm your host, Glen Reynolds. This week we have three new indie releases in theaters. First, an emotional hospital set drama about care and connection. Then a scrappy mockumentary about chasing a movie dream with no safety net. Finally, a wine country buddy comedy that plays like a late night crowd favorite. For TVOD, we have an 80s set horror comedy that turns a farewell weekend into a full-blown nightmare. And for our classic, we're marking a 10-year anniversary for a modern masterpiece. If you care about indie films, show up in theaters. A ticket is not just a ticket. It's a signal that keeps these movies getting made. This episode of Indie Film Weekly is brought to you by Circus Road Films, helping independent filmmakers find their audiences since 2006. Learn more at circusroadfilms.com. Let's dive in. Our first indie film in theaters this week is Charliebird, directed by Libby Ewing. It takes place in the Houston-Galveston area and follows Al, a music therapist in a children's hospital. Played by the writer of the film, Samantha Smart, Al's job is part clinical and part improv. She runs sing-alongs with an acoustic guitar. She also gets pulled into one-on-one sessions when a kid is not buying the group vibe. Her toughest assignment is Charlie, a 17-year-old who has spent years in and out of the hospital and is close enough to 18 to taste the life she is missing. Charlie comes in sharp and closed off. Not rude for sport, just exhausted by being managed. Al tries a bunch of approaches, including showing up in a Snow White costume she grabbed on the cheap. It gets a laugh, but does not solve anything. What shifts them is music as a shared language. Al brings vinyl and a little turntable. Charlie pushes back with her own taste, more hip-hop than sing-along. They start trading songs, trading jokes, and calling each other out. Around that, the film keeps Al's own life in frame. A quiet home with a withdrawn father. Flashbacks that hint at an old family wound tied to her sister. Charlie's parents hover and fracture under the strain in their own ways. The film premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival, and it deservedly left with major U.S. narrative prizes, including a performance award for Gabriela Ochoa Perez. Our second indie film in theaters this week is Micro Budget, directed by Morgan Evans. It's a mockumentary that follows Terry, an aspiring filmmaker with big confidence and no cushion, as he drags his pregnant actress wife from Iowa to Los Angeles to shoot a feature before real life catches up. The camera crew is always there, so every bad idea comes with a close-up and a timestamp. Terry's plan is simple. Keep the crew fed, keep the locations free, keep the cast from quitting, then somehow turn chaos into art. The movie stays funny because it plays the logistics honestly. A friend's apartment becomes a set for exactly one afternoon. A prop goes missing, and suddenly the whole story has to change. A sound problem turns into a marital fight, and the closer the due date gets, the more every compromise feels like a character test. Evans has a good feel for how creative ambition can be both charming and selfish in the same breath. There's also a nice undercurrent of love, the kind that shows up when you're tired and still show up anyway. A couple of recognizable faces pop in, including Bobby Moynihan, and another who I can't name or it would spoil it. But the real joke is the hustle itself. It is scrappy in a proud way. If you've ever tried to make something with no money, you'll recognize the survival math. Our last indie film in theaters this week is The Napa Boys, directed by Nick Corarossi. It drops you into wine country with Jack Jr. and Miles Jr., two friends who treat a lasting weekend like it's a sacred quest. Their guide is a mysterious figure known as the sommelier, who shows up with rules, riddles, and the kind of confidence that makes you follow even when you know you shouldn't. The setup is basically one last ride. The guys pull the old crew back together, add a new superfan podcaster to document the trip, and hit the road believing this will be a clean reset. It is not. Every stop turns into a new test of friendship and ego with tasting rooms, tour buses, and side missions that feel like a dare. Corrossi co-wrote it with Armin Weitzman, and you can feel the looseness in the hangout scenes. The director keeps the pace moving, and he shoots Napa with affection, even when the characters are acting like gremlins. The comedy is broad, but the story has a sweet spine. These are people clinging to the version of themselves that felt fearless. That hits harder than you expect. The film premiered as a late-night crowd movie at the Toronto International Film Festival, and it plays like it wants you in a room full of strangers laughing at the same beat. Bring friends. You'll want witnesses. So in theaters this week, that's Charliebird, Micro Budget, and the Napa Boys. Our spotlight indie film on TVOD this week is Blood Barn, directed by Gabriele Bernini. It's set in the summer of 1985, and it starts with a simple goodbye weekend. Josie is a camp counselor who reunites her closest friends at her family's secluded barn before everyone heads off to college. They show up ready for nostalgia and one last round of inside jokes. Then they notice the place looks wrong. The property has been neglected for years, and the barn has a history Josie has been avoiding. That tension is the engine. The group pokes at the past, makes a few reckless choices, and the air turns heavy like a storm rolling in. When the supernatural element hits, it does not arrive politely. The movie leans into throwback horror comedy with practical effects, big reactions, and a sense of we're all trapped in this together. Chloe Cherry is the recognizable face here, and she fits the tone, game for both the laughs and the panic. What works is how the film keeps the friendships messy and specific, so the mayhem feels personal instead of random. It moves fast and never over-explains the rules. You can rent it this week on Apple TV and Prime Video. Our indie film classic this week is Moonlight, celebrating its 10th anniversary, directed by Barry Jenkins. It tells one life in 3 chapters: childhood, teenage years, and adulthood, all centered on a kid growing up in Miami who's trying to figure out who he is while the world keeps telling him what he should be. The movie is quiet, but is never soft. You feel the pressure in the classroom, in the neighborhood, and in the silence at home. One of the smartest choices is how it treats identity as something you survive before you get to define it. A simple look can land like a punch. A small kindness can change the whole trajectory of a person's week. Mahershala Ali shows up early as Juan, a local dealer who becomes an unexpected mentor. And Naomi Harris gives a performance that is painful and honest as the kid's mother, caught between love and addiction. The film is adapted from a play, and you can feel the structure, but it never feels stagey. It feels lived in, like you're eavesdropping on the moments people remember for the rest of their lives. This is also a movie about tenderness and how hard it can be to accept it when you've been trained to expect danger. If you've not seen it in a while, this anniversary is the perfect excuse. You can watch it on HBO Max. And that wraps it up for February 27, 2026 edition of Indie Film Weekly. If you got something out of the podcast, do me a favor. Subscribe so you do not miss next week. Share the podcast with one movie friend who needs a nudge. Rate and review it, because that's how people actually find the show. Until next week, keep it curious, keep it fearless, and keep it indie.